Good evening. We're in chapters 13, 14, and 15 today, and we're going to continue on with this back and forth between the kings of Israel and the kings of Judah. We're back in Israel, and this time we have Jehoahaz. And it's interesting, the same thing that I mentioned yesterday, and I won't repeat it, about not being able to look forward the same way we can sometimes look back. It says, Jehoahaz sought the Lord's favor, and the Lord listened to him, for he saw how severely the king of Aram was oppressing Israel. The Lord provided a deliverer for Israel, and they escaped from the power of Aram. So the Israelites lived in their own homes as they had before, but they did not turn away from the sins of the house of Jeroboam. So one more time, we have a king who tried to do something good, but it doesn't quite work out. He also likes Elisha, and chapter 13 is the death of Elisha. And he goes to see Elisha, and it's interesting, in chapter 13, verse 14, he says the same thing to Elisha that Elisha said to Elijah when he was dying. He says, my father, he cried, the chariots and horsemen of Israel. In other words, Elisha is getting ready to go. He gives him an interesting thing. He says, take a bow and arrow and help him shoot it through a window and all this stuff. He takes some arrows and he says, hit them on the ground however many times you want. He hits them 3 times. And Elisha says, you should have hit him more, because the number of times you hit him is how many times you're going to defeat the king of Aram, his big enemy right now. And so he said, you hit it 20 times, you'd have won 20 times. This way you're only going to win 3. Elisha then dies, and then there's a very, very strange passage down around verse 21 in chapter 13. It says, once while some Israelites were burying a man, suddenly they saw a band of raiders, so they threw the man's body into Elisha's tomb. When the body touched Elisha's bones, the man came to life and stood up on his feet. It has no other comments about that. The only thing I would say is that I had mentioned earlier that Elisha repeats a lot of, he doubles the number of miracles that Elijah performs, and many of the miracles that he performs are either the same as or very similar to miracles that Jesus ultimately performed. And you know, the last and most great miracle was one that was performed on Jesus, not by Jesus, and that was his resurrection from the tomb. So here we have a semblance of that, in that a man has been thrown into the tomb dead, and he rises up alive. So anyway, enjoy that. Chapter 13, and then chapter 14, we have Amaziah, the king of Judah, and it says he did what was right in the eyes of the Lord, but not as his father David had done. In everything he followed the example of his father Joash. In other words, he was almost, but not quite, as good as his father David had been. He said, after the kingdom was firmly in his grasp, he executed the officials who had murdered his father the king, yet he did not put the sons of the assassins to death. When you get over later on towards the end of the chapter, you find that verse 19 says, they conspired against him, talking about Amaziah again, in Jerusalem, and he fled to Lachish, but they sent men after him to Lachish and killed him there. It doesn't say that it's the sons, but there's a good possibility that there was this ongoing revenge being taken. And then you get to a Jeroboam II of Israel, and it says the son of Jehoash, king of Israel, became king in Samaria, and he reigned. Just lost that for a second. He reigned 41 years. He did evil in the eyes of the Lord, and did not turn away from any of the sins of Jeroboam, the sons of Nebat, which he caused Israel to commit. One more time, they just continue on in the ways of their fathers. It is so much easier to sin than it is to follow God. It is just hard to imagine, but we see that every day in our own lives. I hope you're enjoying the reading, and we'll pick up again tomorrow. Have a good evening. God bless.